At 6:47 a.m., a blood-soaked German shepherd burst from the tree line, dragging a woman's body through the snow. Commander Ethan Cross dropped his axe and ran. The dog collapsed at his feet, still gripping the woman's torn jacket in her jaws. Still pulling, still fighting. The woman's eyes fluttered open, just long enough to whisper 4 words that would haunt him forever. "They're harvesting the children." Then her hand went limp. The dog howled once, a sound of grief and warning, and Ethan knew his quiet retirement had just ended in blood. Where are you watching from? Comment your city below and subscribe to follow this story to the very end. Let me see how far this journey travels. Ethan Cross hadn't held a weapon in 14 months. He had told himself that was a choice, a decision. A man reclaiming his humanity after 15 years of missions that stripped it away piece by piece. His therapist at the VA called it progress. His former teammates called it running. Ethan called it survival. The cabin in Montana was supposed to be his sanctuary. 40 acres of nothing but pine trees, frozen streams, and silence so deep it hurt. No orders, no objectives, no body counts. Just firewood to split, and a German shepherd named Titan, who understood that some wounds didn't show on the surface. Titan had been with him for 6 years, 4 of them in combat zones where the dog's nose had saved more lives than any piece of technology the Navy could provide. Retired now, like his handler, growing gray around the muzzle, still sharp in the eyes. That morning, Titan's bark changed everything. It wasn't his alert bark, the sharp, controlled signal that meant explosives or hostiles. This was something rawer, older. The sound a dog makes when it recognizes another of its kind in distress. Ethan set down his axe and turned toward the tree line. The first thing he saw was movement. Chaotic, desperate, too low to the ground to be human. Then the shape resolved. A German shepherd, female, her sable coat matted with blood and ice, her body straining forward with every ounce of strength she had left. She was dragging something. Someone. Ethan was running before his mind caught up with his body. 14 months of peaceful retirement vanished in half a heartbeat. His legs churned through the snow. His breath came sharp and focused. Every sense sharpened the way they did when death was close. The dog saw him coming and didn't stop, didn't slow. She kept pulling, kept fighting, kept refusing to let go of the jacket clenched in her jaws. Even when her legs buckled. Even when she fell. She fell 20 feet from Ethan's porch, and she still didn't release her grip. Ethan dropped to his knees beside them. The woman was young, mid-20s maybe, with long black hair plastered to her face by sweat and frozen blood. Her jacket was torn at the shoulder, and beneath the tear, Ethan could see the ugly pucker of a gunshot wound. Entry. No exit visible. The bullet was still inside. Her lips were blue. Her skin was gray. Her breathing was so shallow, he had to press his ear to her chest to confirm she was still alive. "Hey! Hey!" He tapped her cheek. "Can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. "Stay with me. I'm going to get you inside. Stay with me." The dog whined and finally released the jacket. She tried to stand, stumbled, and collapsed again. Her eyes, dark brown, intelligent, desperate, locked onto Ethan's face with an intensity that made his chest tight. "You did good, girl." His voice cracked despite himself. "You did so good. Now let me take over." He gathered the woman in his arms. She weighed nothing, far too light for someone her height, and carried her toward the cabin. Titan flanked him on one side, the female dog dragging herself along on the other, refusing to be left behind. Inside, warmth wrapped around them like a mercy. Ethan laid the woman on his bed, stripped off her frozen outer layers, and began assessing the damage. The shoulder wound was bad, but survivable if he could stop the bleeding. The hypothermia was worse. Her core temperature had dropped dangerously low, and her body was shutting down to protect itself. He worked with the calm efficiency of a man who had performed battlefield medicine more times than he could count. Pressure on the wound, blankets layered thick, warm water bottles against her armpits and neck. IV fluids from the emergency kit he kept stocked because old habits died harder than anything else. The female dog had crawled to the foot of the bed and lay there watching, her chest heaving, her eyes never leaving her handler's face. "She's going to be okay," Ethan told the dog, not sure if he was lying. "You got her here in time." 3 hours later, the woman's eyes opened. Ethan was sitting beside the bed, Titan at his feet, when she gasped and tried to sit up. He caught her shoulders and eased her back down. "Easy, easy. You're safe." "Where?" Her voice was a ragged whisper. "Where am I?" "My cabin, about 15 miles south of the Black Rock Ridge. A dog dragged you here." Her eyes went wide. "Shadow? Where's Shadow?" "The German Shepherd? She's right there." Ethan pointed to the foot of the bed. "She's hurt, but she's alive. She wouldn't leave you." The woman, no, the agent, Ethan realized, catching a glimpse of the badge on the jacket he'd removed, let out a sob of relief. Her hand reached out, trembling, and Shadow crawled forward to press her nose against those fingers. "Good girl," the woman whispered. "You saved me. You saved me." Ethan gave them a moment. Then, "You want to tell me what's going on? Because you've got a bullet in your shoulder, and a dog who dragged you 3 miles through a blizzard. And I'm guessing that's not a normal Tuesday." The woman's eyes met his. They were brown, dark, sharp, full of a pain that had nothing to do with her physical injuries. "My name is Mia Chen. I'm an FBI special agent, undercover division." She swallowed hard. "I've been embedded with the Kovacs syndicate for 8 months. Trafficking? Yes, but not what you think." Her hand tightened on Shadow's fur. "Not drugs, not weapons. Children." Ethan's blood went cold. "They're holding them in the old Black Rock mine, 15 miles north. 23 children, ages 6 to 14. I was gathering evidence to bring the whole operation down." Mia's voice broke. "But they made me. 3 days ago, someone inside the bureau, someone high up, tipped them off. And they shot you." "I ran. I had no choice. I had evidence on a drive, photos, recordings, financial records, everything the bureau would need to prosecute. I hid it in my jacket, and I ran." She gestured weakly toward the jacket on the floor. "Shadow found me bleeding in the snow. She wouldn't let me stop, wouldn't let me give up." Ethan checked the jacket. The hidden pocket was empty. His stomach dropped. "Mia, the drive isn't here." Her face went white. "That's impossible. I had it. I know I had it." Shadow lifted her head and whined. Then she stood, unsteady, limping, but determined, and walked to the cabin door. She scratched at the wood twice, then looked back at Ethan. He understood immediately. "She knows where it is. She must have seen where I fell, where I dropped it." Mia tried to rise. "I have to go back. I have to—" "You're not going anywhere." Ethan pushed her gently back against the pillows. "You've got a bullet in your shoulder, and your body temperature is still recovering. You try to go out there, you'll die before you make it a mile." "Those children don't have time for me to recover." The words came out sharp, desperate. "They're moving them in 48 hours. That's what I heard before they shot me. 48 hours, and then they disappear. Every single one of them. Gone forever." "Gone where?" Mia's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "The Kovacs syndicate isn't selling them into slavery. They're selling them for parts." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Organ harvesting, Commander. On American soil. The youngest child I saw was 6 years old." Ethan didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he heard his therapist's voice talking about triggers and trauma and the importance of maintaining boundaries. Somewhere else, deeper, older, he heard the voice of the man he had been, the operator who had spent 15 years hunting monsters across 3 continents. That man had never learned how to look away. How many guards at the mine? Mia blinked. What? Guards. How many? What kind of weapons? What's the layout? Maybe 15 to 20? Assault rifles, some handguns. The mine has 3 levels. The children are on the lowest level, behind a security door. Victor Kovac himself oversees the operation, and he never goes anywhere without at least 4 bodyguards. Victor Kovac. Ethan's jaw tightened. I've heard that name. He's responsible for trafficking operations across Eastern Europe and now here. But he's protected. Someone inside the Bureau is feeding him information. That's the only way he could have known about my cover. Mia grabbed Ethan's wrist with surprising strength. My handler went dark 2 days before they shot me. Agent David Reeves. He was the only one who knew my location. And now he's gone. You think they killed him? I think they turned him. Or he was always theirs. Mia's grip tightened. Which means I can't call this in. I can't trust anyone in the Bureau. I don't know how high the corruption goes. Ethan looked down at her, this 25-year-old woman who had spent 8 months in hell, who had crawled through a blizzard with a bullet in her body, who was asking him to help save children she'd never met. He looked at Shadow, still waiting by the door, still refusing to give up. He looked at Titan, who had risen to his feet with the alert posture of a dog who sensed what was coming. Tell me everything, Ethan said. Every detail about that mine, every face you saw, every voice you heard. Don't leave anything out. You're going to help me? Those children need someone to fight for them. You can't do it alone, not like this. Ethan stood and walked to the closet he hadn't opened in 14 months. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was the gear he had sworn he would never touch again. And I stopped being able to walk away from people who need help a long time ago. You don't understand what you're getting into. These people... I spent 15 years hunting people like this in places where the law didn't exist. Ethan pulled out the oilcloth bundle and set it on the table. I know exactly what I'm getting into. Mia stared at him, then at the weapons taking shape on the table, then back at him. Who are you? Commander Ethan Cross, Navy SEAL, retired. He chambered around and met her eyes. At least, I was retired until about 3 hours ago. Shadow barked once, sharp, urgent. Titan answered with a growl, his attention fixed on the window. Ethan's hand went to his weapon before his mind consciously registered the threat. What is it? Mia asked. Company. Ethan moved to the window, keeping his body out of the line of fire. Through the frost-covered glass, he could see movement in the tree line. Dark shapes. At least 4, maybe more, moving with the coordinated precision of hunters who knew their prey was wounded. They tracked me, Mia breathed. Oh God, they tracked me. Or they tracked Shadow. Ethan's mind raced through tactical options. 1 entrance, 2 windows, no back door. Bad defensive position. How long were you running before you collapsed? I don't know. Hours. I lost track. Blood trail in the snow. Easy to follow if you know what you're looking for. He checked his magazine. Full. Not enough. How many rounds do you have on you? None. I lost my weapon in the river. Great. Ethan pulled a backup pistol from his bag and pressed it into her hands. Can you shoot? I'm FBI. Of course I can shoot. Can you shoot with a bullet in your shoulder? Mia's jaw set. Watch me. Despite everything, Ethan almost smiled. Stay low. Stay behind the bed. If they get past me, you put them down and you don't hesitate. What about you? I'm going to give them something to think about. He moved to the door, crouched, and eased it open. The cold hit him like a fist. In the distance, the shapes had stopped moving, waiting, watching, assessing the situation. Ethan counted 6. 6 hostiles against 1 operator and 1 wounded agent. Bad odds. He'd faced worse. Titan pressed against his leg, ready. Not this time, boy. Ethan's hand found the dog's head. I need you to protect her. Can you do that? Titan's eyes met his. For a long moment, neither moved. Then the dog turned and padded back to the bed, taking up a position beside Shadow. Ethan took a breath, let it out. Became the man he had spent 14 months trying to forget. Then he stepped out into the cold and started walking toward the enemy. The first shot came from his left, wide, panicked, the mistake of a man who had expected easy prey. Ethan dropped, rolled, and returned fire in a single fluid motion. The shooter fell. The remaining 5 scattered, seeking cover, suddenly realizing they had miscalculated badly. "He's military!" someone shouted. "Call for backup!" Too late. Ethan moved through the trees like a ghost. He had spent years learning to become invisible in environments far more hostile than this. The men hunting Mia were thugs, competent with weapons maybe, but not trained, not disciplined, not ready for a predator who had spent his life becoming exactly what they feared. The second man died behind a pine tree, never seeing the blade that ended him. The third tried to run. He made it 6 steps. The fourth found his courage and charged. Ethan respected that. He still put 2 rounds in the man's chest before he got within arm's reach. The 5th and 6th were smarter. They fell back, retreating toward the tree line, shouting into radios that someone on the other end would answer. Ethan let them go. He could have pursued, could have ended them before they reached their vehicles. But he needed information more than he needed kills, and scared men talked to their bosses. When he returned to the cabin, Mia was sitting up in bed, the pistol still clutched in white-knuckled hands, her face pale but determined. "How many?" 4 down, 2 retreated. Ethan began reloading. "They'll be back with more. We need to move." "I can't. My shoulder." "You can, and you will." He pulled a med kit from his bag. "I'm going to give you something for the pain. It'll make you feel like you can run a marathon. The crash is going to be brutal, but we'll worry about that later." "What about Shadow? She can barely walk." Ethan looked at the FBI K-9, who had dragged herself to her handler's side, and was watching with exhausted, determined eyes. "Titan." The command was quiet, but clear. "Carry." The male German Shepherd moved to Shadow's side, positioned himself carefully, and waited while Ethan fashioned a harness that would let Titan support Shadow's weight as they moved. Mia watched with something like awe. He's going to carry her? They're partners now. Same as us. Ethan finished the harness and tested it. Shadow whined once, then relaxed, trusting the strange dog who had somehow become her ally. That's what partners do. He helped Mia to her feet. She swayed, but didn't fall. "The evidence," she said. "We still need to find the drive. Without it..." "Without it, we have no proof. I know." Ethan grabbed his pack. "But first, we need to get somewhere defensible. Somewhere they won't expect." "And then?" Ethan met her eyes. "And then we go get those children." Mia held his gaze for a long moment. Whatever she saw there, whoever she saw, it made her nod slowly. "Okay, Commander. Lead the way." They moved out into the frozen wilderness, 2 humans and 2 dogs, running toward a darkness that waited to swallow them whole. Behind them, the cabin sat empty and silent. Ahead, 23 children waited in cages, not knowing that help was finally coming. And somewhere in the distance, Viktor Kovac received a phone call that made him smile. "So the little mouse found the protector," he said softly. "Good. I was beginning to get bored." He hung up and turned to the man beside him. A man in an expensive suit, with graying hair, and the confident posture of someone who had spent 30 years climbing the FBI ladder. "Deputy Director Hayes," Kovac said. "It seems we have a complication." William Hayes, the man who had authorized Mia Chen's undercover mission 8 months ago, simply smiled. "No," he said. "We have an opportunity." They had been moving for 2 hours when Mia's legs finally gave out. She went down hard, catching herself on a fallen log, her breath coming in ragged gasps that turned to white clouds in the frozen air. The pain medication Ethan had given her was wearing off faster than expected, and the bullet in her shoulder had started screaming again. "I need a minute," she gasped. "Just 1 minute." Ethan dropped into a crouch beside her, his eyes scanning the tree line behind them. No movement. No sound except the wind. But that didn't mean anything. The men hunting them knew these mountains better than he did. "We don't have a minute." His voice was gentle but firm. "They've got vehicles. Dogs, maybe. The longer we stay still, the smaller our lead gets." I know. Mia pressed her good hand against her shoulder, and it came away slick with fresh blood. "It's just, let me see." She tried to pull away. "I'm fine." "You're bleeding through the bandage. That's not fine." Ethan reached for her jacket. "Mia, let me see." She stopped fighting. Let him ease the fabric aside and examine the wound beneath. It was worse than he'd hoped. The bullet had shifted during their trek, and the exit wound he'd missed earlier was seeping steadily. If he didn't stabilize it soon, she'd bleed out before they reached safety. "How bad?" she asked, watching his face. "I've seen worse." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting." Ethan pulled fresh bandages from his pack and began working. His hands were steady. They always were when lives hung in the balance. "Talk to me. Keep your mind off the pain." "Talk about what?" "The mine, the children, anything that keeps you conscious." Mia closed her eyes. When she spoke again, her voice was distant, haunted. "The first time I saw them, I almost broke cover." "The children?" "There was this little girl, 6 years old, maybe 7. They'd just brought her in, and she was still fighting, screaming, biting anyone who got close." A ghost of a smile crossed Mia's face. "She reminded me of myself at that age. Fierce, unbroken." "What happened to her?" "They drugged her, same as the others. A ketamine cocktail that keeps them docile but doesn't damage the organs." Mia's voice hardened. "That's all they are to Kovac. Organ farms with heartbeats." Ethan finished the bandage and sat back. "How does he choose them?" "The children? He targets runaways mostly. Kids in the foster system who've slipped through the cracks. Kids whose disappearance won't make headlines." Mia opened her eyes. "That's the genius of it, if you can call evil genius. He takes the ones nobody's looking for, the ones the system already failed, and sells their organs to the highest bidder. International buyers mostly. Wealthy families in countries where transplant lists are decades long. They pay $250,000 for a healthy kidney, $500,000 for a liver. A heart?" She laughed bitterly. "A heart can go for over $1 million if the match is right." Ethan's jaw tightened. He had seen atrocities in his years of service. Mass graves, torture chambers, the aftermath of ethnic cleansing. But there was something uniquely obscene about what Mia was describing. The industrialization of cruelty. The commodification of children's bodies. "How did you get inside?" "Kovac needed a medical consultant, someone to evaluate the merchandise and make sure they were healthy enough to be profitable." Mia's voice was flat. I have a nursing background. The Bureau gave me fake credentials from a Romanian medical school. Kovacs people vetted me for 3 months before they let me anywhere near the operation. 3 months of pretending to work for monsters. 5 months, actually, before I saw my first child. She met his eyes. You want to know the hardest part? It wasn't the pretending. It was the waiting. Watching them bring in shipments, knowing exactly what was happening, and not being able to do anything because I didn't have enough evidence yet. You did what you had to do. Did I? Sometimes I wonder. Mia's hand found Shadow's head, and the dog pressed closer despite her own injuries. There were moments when I could have acted, could have blown my cover and saved one or two. But I kept telling myself the bigger picture mattered more, that if I just held on a little longer, I could save all of them. And now? Now 23 children are sitting in cages because I waited too long. Her voice cracked. And the man I trusted to protect my cover sold me to the people I was trying to destroy. Titan's head snapped up. His ears rotated toward the east, like satellite dishes locking onto a signal. Ethan was on his feet instantly, weapon drawn. What is it, boy? The dog didn't bark, didn't growl, just stood motionless, every muscle taut, staring into the trees. Someone's coming, Mia whispered. No. Ethan listened, filtering out the wind, the creak of branches, the distant sound of the river. What he heard made his blood run cold. Multiple someones, and they're not being quiet about it. Engines, the low rumble of all-terrain vehicles, maybe a quarter-mile out, and closing fast. They found us, Mia said. How did they? Doesn't matter. Move. Ethan hauled her to her feet, ignoring her gasp of pain. Shadow, Titan, heel. Both dogs fell in beside them as Ethan half-carried Mia through the trees. The sound of engines grew louder, closer. Whoever was driving knew exactly where they were headed. Then Mia saw it at the same moment Ethan did. A cliff face ahead, rising 30 feet straight up. No way around, no way through. We're trapped, she breathed. Not yet. Ethan's eyes scanned the rocks until he found what he was looking for, a narrow fissure near the base, partially hidden by fallen debris. There, can you fit? Maybe, but Ethan, if they see us go in, they won't. He pushed her toward the opening. Get inside. Get as far back as you can. Don't make a sound until I come for you. What about you? I'm going to buy you some time. Mia grabbed his arm. That's suicide. There could be a dozen of them. Then I'll be sure to complain to management. He pulled free of her grip. Mia, go. She stared at him. This man she'd known for less than 12 hours, who had killed for her, bled for her, carried her when she couldn't walk. A man who was about to stand alone against an army because she couldn't run anymore. Why? She asked. Why are you doing this? Ethan's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. Something old and wounded and impossibly determined. Because someone has to. He turned and walked toward the sound of engines, Titan at his side. Mia watched until he disappeared into the trees. Then she squeezed through the fissure, Shadow limping beside her, and prayed to a god she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. Ethan counted 4 ATVs as they broke through the tree line. 16 men total, armed with assault rifles and the casual confidence of hunters who expected easy prey. They spread out in a search pattern, engines idling, scanning the terrain for signs of their targets. Ethan let 3 of them pass his position. Then he opened fire. The first man fell before anyone realized what was happening. The second died reaching for his radio. The third managed to fire a wild burst that shredded pine branches 10 feet to Ethan's left, before 2 rounds from Ethan's pistol ended his part in the hunt. Then, all hell broke loose. Bullets chewed through the trees around him as the remaining men converged on his position. Ethan moved, rolled, fired, moved again. A ghost in the crossfire. Never where they expected, always exactly where he needed to be. Titan worked beside him like an extension of his own body. The dog took down 2 men who tried to flank their position, his jaws closing on arms and throats with brutal efficiency. This wasn't the trained, controlled work of a detection dog. This was combat, pure and raw. The wolf beneath the service animal, rising to protect his pack. 8 men down, 5 remaining. Ethan felt a round graze his ribs. Fire and impact, but not penetration. He ignored it, kept moving, kept fighting. Another man fell. Another. Then his pistol clicked empty. The last 3 men realized it at the same moment. They emerged from cover, weapons raised, confidence returning now that the ghost had been defanged. "Drop it," the lead man ordered. "Drop the weapon and call off the dog, or we put you both down." Ethan let the empty pistol fall. His hand went to Titan's collar, and the dog froze mid-lunge, trembling with the effort of restraint. "Smart choice." The lead man stepped closer, rifle aimed at Ethan's chest. "Mr. Kovac has questions for you. Lots of questions.
And he's very good at getting answers. I'll bet he is. The woman, where is she?"
"Gone." Ethan kept his voice flat. "She didn't make it. Bled out about a mile back."
"Bullshit. We saw 2 heat signatures on thermal before we lost the drone feed."
"Your drone must need calibrating." The man's rifle butt caught Ethan across the face. Stars exploded behind his eyes. He tasted blood.
"Last chance. Where is she?"
Ethan spat red onto the snow.
"Go to hell."
The man raised his rifle again, and shadow burst from the fissure like a demon made of fur and fury. She shouldn't have been able to move that fast. Her leg was injured, her body exhausted from dragging Mia through miles of frozen wilderness. But dogs don't know what they can't do. Dogs only know what they must. She hit the lead man before he could turn, 80 pounds of desperate courage driving him to the ground. His rifle discharged into the air. His scream cut through the forest. Ethan moved. He took the knife from the man Shadow had downed and buried it in the second hostile's throat before the man could process what was happening. The third tried to run. Titan brought him down in 4 strides. Silence fell. Ethan stood among the bodies, breathing hard, blood dripping from his face and his side. Mia emerged from the fissure, leaning against the rocks for support. "I told you to stay hidden." "I did stay hidden. Shadow didn't." Mia looked at the carnage around them. 13 men. You killed 13 men. 14. Ethan gestured to the one Shadow had taken down, who wasn't moving anymore. She finished what she started. Shadow limped to Mia's side and collapsed against her legs. The dog was trembling now, the adrenaline fading, the pain returning. But her eyes were still alert, still watching, still protecting. "We need to move," Ethan said. "More will come." "Ethan," Mia's voice stopped him. "You're hurt." He looked down at his side, where blood had soaked through his jacket. "It's a graze. I'll live." "That's not a graze. That's a through and through." "Then it's a through and through. I'll still live." He picked up one of the fallen rifles and checked the magazine. Full. Better. "Can you walk?" "Can you?" "I don't have a choice." He met her eyes. "Neither do you." They moved on. 2 hours later, Shadow stopped. She had been leading them, following some invisible trail that only she could sense. And now she stood motionless, nose pointed toward a depression in the ground 50 feet ahead. "What is it, girl?" Mia asked. Shadow whined once and started forward. They found the body half buried in snow. Male, late 40s, wearing a suit that was wildly inappropriate for the Montana wilderness. Single gunshot wound to the back of the head. Mia fell to her knees beside him.
David, you know him?
Agent David Reeves. Her hands were shaking as she brushed snow from the dead man's face. My handler, the only person in the bureau who knew my location. Ethan crouched beside her. You said he went dark 2 days ago. I thought they'd turned him, or that he'd been compromised. Mia's voice broke. He wasn't a traitor. He was a victim. He died trying to protect me. Or he died because he was about to expose whoever's really pulling the strings.
Ethan began searching the body. When was the last time you talked to him?
3 days ago. He was nervous. Said he'd found something in the Bureau's internal communications. Something that suggested the leak went higher than anyone suspected. Mia wiped her eyes. I told him to be careful. I told him... Mia. Ethan's voice was sharp. Look at this. He held up a phone. Standard FBI issue. Cracked from the cold, but still intact. How did they miss this? Maybe they didn't search him. Maybe they were in a hurry. Ethan powered it on. The battery was at 4%. We've got maybe 5 minutes before this dies. What's his passcode? I don't know. We never... Mia stopped. Wait, he used to joke about it. Said his passcode was the day his daughter was born. November 23rd. Ethan typed 1123. The phone unlocked. The first thing he saw was a text message, typed but never sent. Chen compromised. Leak is Hayes. Get her out now. Hayes, Mia breathed. Deputy Director William Hayes. He's the one who approved my mission. He's the one who... She stopped, the implication hitting her like a physical blow. He's been protecting Kovac the whole time. Every tip-off, every failed raid, every agent who got too close. It was all him. Looks like your handler figured it out. Ethan scrolled through the phone. And Hayes had him killed before he could warn you. But why? Hayes has been with the Bureau for 30 years. He's decorated, respected. Why would he? Money, power, protection. Ethan found a folder of documents and began scanning. According to these files, Hayes has been receiving payments from Kovac for at least 5 years. $3 million in offshore accounts, plus property in Belize and the Caymans. $3 million to help traffic children. $3 million that Reeves could prove. Ethan pocketed the phone just as the battery died. This changes everything. We're not just fighting Kovac anymore. We're fighting the FBI. Not the FBI, just Hayes. You sure about that? You know how many people he could have compromised in 30 years? How many agents, prosecutors, judges? Ethan's jaw tightened. Mia, this guy isn't a mole. He's a network. Then we go around him. We find someone above him, someone he can't touch. Who? The director? The attorney general? You want to bet 23 children's lives that none of them are compromised too? Mia fell silent. The weight of what they were facing settled over her like a shroud. Then what do we do? Ethan didn't answer immediately. He looked at Titan, who was watching the horizon with tired but vigilant eyes. He looked at Shadow, who had curled against Mia's legs like a furry anchor keeping her from drowning. He looked at the dead FBI agent who had tried to do the right thing and paid with his life. We do it ourselves, he said finally. Ourselves? Against Kovac's army and a corrupt deputy director? Not just ourselves. Ethan pulled out his own phone, a burner he'd kept for emergencies. I have friends, men I served with, men who've been where we are, facing impossible odds against enemies who owned the system. You're going to call in the SEALs? I'm going to call in 3 men who will walk through hell if I ask them to. Ethan dialed a number from memory. Whether they're still officially SEALs is a different question. The phone rang twice. Ghost speaking. It's Cross. Silence. Then, "Ethan? Jesus Christ, we thought you were dead. You dropped off the grid 14 months ago." "I was healing." "From what?" "Everything." Ethan watched the sun beginning to set behind the mountains. "I need help, Derek. The kind that doesn't go through official channels."
What kind of trouble? The kind that involves children in cages, organ harvesters, and a deputy director of the FBI who's been protecting the whole operation. A long pause. "You're serious." 23 kids, ages 6 to 14, being held in a mine about 15 miles from my location. They're scheduled to be moved in less than 40 hours. Ethan's voice hardened. After that, they disappear. Permanently. "How many hostiles?" 15 to 20 at the site, plus whatever reinforcements they call in when they realize their hunting party isn't coming back. "You already engaged?" "I've thinned the herd, but I can't hit the mine alone, not with a wounded civilian and 2 injured dogs." "Dogs?" "Long story." Ethan heard voices in the background, Derek relaying information to someone else. "Can you come?" "The question isn't whether I can come. The question is, how fast can I get there?" Derek's voice was all business now, the casual tone replaced by the cold efficiency of a man planning an operation. "I'm in Nevada, 8 hours by car, 5 if I push it. I'll grab Marcus and Jonah on the way." "Marcus Webb? I thought he was still deployed." "Discharged. Medical. Took a round in the hip that the surgeons couldn't quite fix." Derek paused. "He's been looking for a reason to get back in the fight. So has Jonah." "This isn't a sanctioned op. If this goes sideways, there's no cavalry coming. No extraction. No official record that any of us were ever here." "Ethan," Derek's voice was almost gentle. "We've run ghost ops in 6 countries, against enemies with nuclear weapons. You think a corrupt FBI director and some human traffickers are going to scare us off?" "I think I needed to give you the chance to say no. And I think you already knew what the answer would be." The sound of a car engine starting came through the phone. "Send me coordinates. We'll be there before dawn." "Derek." "Yeah?" "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when those kids are safe and the bastards who took them are in the ground." The line clicked dead. Mia had been listening in silence. Now she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "You really think 4 men can take on Kovac's operation?" "I think 4 SEALs can do things that would make most armies weep." Ethan pocketed the phone. "But we're not going in blind. We need intel, reconnaissance, and we need to find that evidence drive you lost." "Shadow knows where it is." "Then Shadow leads. But first, we need shelter. Somewhere we can rest, plan, and prepare." He looked at her, really looked, taking in the exhaustion, the pain, the stubborn determination that kept her standing despite everything. "There's an abandoned ranger station about 4 miles east. Can you make it?" Mia's chin lifted. "I crawled 3 miles through a blizzard with a bullet in my shoulder." 4 miles with both feet? That's a vacation. Despite everything, the dead body at their feet, the enemies closing in, the impossible mission ahead, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in 14 months. Hope. "Then let's move," he said. "We've got work to do." They left Agent Reeves where he lay. There was no time for burial, no time for ceremony. But Mia paused long enough to close his eyes and whisper something too quiet for Ethan to hear. A prayer, maybe, or a promise. Then they moved on, 4 souls bound together by fate and fury, walking toward a reckoning that would either save 23 innocent lives or end them all. And in a fortified compound 15 miles north, Victor Kovac received another phone call. "They killed them all," the voice on the line reported. 14 men, the SEAL and his dogs. Kovacs smiled. Impressive. I'm beginning to like this man. Sir? Tell Deputy Director Hayes to double the guard at the mine. Triple it if necessary. I want this Commander Cross alive when he comes for the children. Kovacs' smile widened. A man willing to die for strangers' children? That kind of loyalty has value. Perhaps I can redirect it. And the woman? Agent Chen has caused enough trouble. When you find her, make sure she doesn't cause any more. He hung up and turned to the window, where moonlight illuminated the mountains he had made his kingdom. Come, Commander Cross, he said softly. Come and see what your honor has brought you. Somewhere in the depths of the mine, a 6-year-old girl opened her eyes in the darkness and listened to footsteps approaching her cage. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She had learned that crying only made it worse. But deep inside, in the place where hope refused to die, she whispered a single word. Please. The abandoned ranger station appeared through the trees like a forgotten promise. Mia stumbled the last 100 feet, her good arm wrapped around Ethan's shoulders, her face gray with exhaustion and blood loss. Shadow limped beside her, still refusing to be separated from her handler, despite the pain that made every step a battle. Titan brought up the rear, his head constantly swiveling, watching for threats that could emerge from any direction. Almost there, Ethan said. Just a few more steps. You keep saying that. And it keeps being true. The door was locked, but the lock was old. Ethan had it open in 30 seconds, with nothing but a knife and the skills that came from a decade of breaking into places far more secure. Inside, the air was stale, but mercifully dry. Someone had boarded up the windows years ago, which meant they could risk a small fire without the light giving away their position. Ethan helped Mia to the floor, propping her against the wall where she could rest without lying flat. Then he began working, fire first, then water, then a fresh assessment of her wound. It's stabilizing, he said, examining the bandages. You're not losing as much blood anymore. Is that good news, or are you just trying to keep me from panicking? Both. He allowed himself a small smile. You're tougher than you look, Agent Chen. I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. Shadow had curled up at Mia's feet, her injured legs stretched out awkwardly, her eyes already closing. The dog was running on empty, but she was still alert enough to whine softly when Titan approached to sniff her wounds. They've bonded, Mia said, watching the dogs. Combat does that. Ethan finished his work and sat back. You trust someone to have your back in a firefight. The relationship changes, becomes something deeper than friendship. Is that what happened with your team? The men you called? Ethan was quiet for a moment. Derek, Marcus, and Jonah saved my life more times than I can count. I saved theirs. After a while, the score stops mattering. You just know that no matter what happens, they'll be there. Must be nice. Mia's voice was wistful. Having people you can trust like that. You trusted your handler. And look where that got him. She closed her eyes. Shot in the back of the head in the middle of nowhere, trying to warn me about a threat I should have seen coming. You couldn't have known. Couldn't I? The signs were there. Missions that went wrong at the last minute. Intel that leaked before we could act on it. I told myself it was bad luck. Normal operational friction. Her jaw tightened. I was an idiot. You were optimistic. There's a difference. Not in this business. In this business, optimism gets people killed. Ethan didn't argue. He couldn't. 3 hours later, Shadow woke them both with a low growl. Ethan was on his feet instantly, weapon drawn, positioning himself between Mia and the door. Titan took a flanking position, his body tense, his attention fixed on something outside. What is it? Mia whispered. Someone's approaching. Ethan listened. Footsteps. Multiple sets, moving with the careful precision of people trying to be quiet.
3, maybe 4. Kovacs men? If it was Kovacs men, we'd already be dead. Ethan moved to the window and peered through a gap in the boards. They wouldn't be sneaking, they'd be shooting. A voice came from outside, low, controlled, familiar. Cross, if you shoot me, I'm going to be very disappointed. Ethan's shoulders relaxed. That's Derek.
He opened the door to find 3 men standing in the pre-dawn darkness, armed to the teeth and grinning like they'd just shown up to the best party of the year. Derek Ghost Sullivan stood at the front, lean, dark-haired, with a kind of face that could blend into any crowd, and the kind of eyes that missed nothing. Behind him, Marcus Webb loomed like a wall of muscle, his dark skin gleaming with sweat from the hike, one hand resting on the pistol at his hip. And beside Marcus, Jonah Torres offered a crooked smile, his boyish features at odds with the rifle slung across his back. "You look like hell," Derek said, stepping inside. "He should see the other guys." Ethan clasped his hand. "Thanks for coming. Like I was going to miss this? Children in cages, organ harvesters, corrupt FBI directors?" Derek's grin faded into something harder. "This is exactly the kind of thing we used to dream about. A fight that actually matters." Marcus pushed past them, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Mia. "This is the FBI agent?" "Special Agent Mia Chen," Ethan confirmed. "She's been undercover with Kovac for 8 months." "And she's still alive?" Marcus's eyebrows rose. "Impressive." "I had help," Mia gestured toward Shadow, who had raised her head but not moved from her protective position. "My canine dragged me 3 miles through a blizzard to find your friend." "Good dog." Marcus moved to examine Shadow's injuries with surprisingly gentle hands. "Leg's bad. She needs surgery." "She needs rest," Mia corrected. "Surgery can wait until the mission's over." "The mission might kill her. Then she dies doing what she was trained to do." Mia's voice was steel. "Same as all of us." Marcus met her gaze. Something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. "I like her," he said to Ethan. "Thought you might." Jonah had been quietly unpacking gear from his bag. Weapons, ammunition, medical supplies, communication equipment. Now he looked up with his tablet in hand. "I pulled satellite imagery of the Black Rock mine on the drive up. You want the good news or the bad news?" "Bad news first," Ethan said. "Always. Security has tripled since yesterday. At least 30 armed hostiles on site, plus vehicles, plus what looks like a helicopter on standby." Jonah turned the tablet to show them the images. "They're expecting us." "And the good news?" "The good news is they're expecting a small team with limited firepower. They've concentrated their forces at the main entrance and the primary access points." Jonah zoomed in on a section of the image. "But there's a secondary entrance here, an old ventilation shaft that was sealed off decades ago. It's not on any current blueprints, but I found it in historical mining records." "Big enough for a man? Big enough for a small team moving single file. It'll put us in the lower levels, right where they're holding the children." Mia leaned forward. "How do you know about the lower levels?" "Agent Chen, I spent 3 hours on the drive up here pulling every piece of data I could find about this operation. Mining permits, construction records, utility connections, even old newspaper articles about accidents." Jonah's smile was gone now, replaced by the focused intensity of a man who had made information warfare his specialty. "I know the layout of that mine better than the people who work there." "But you don't know the guard rotations," Mia said, "or the security protocols, or where exactly they're keeping the children." "No, that's what we need you for." Mia closed her eyes, accessing memories she had spent weeks trying to bury. "The children are held in what used to be the mine's deepest chamber. It's been converted into a holding facility. Cages, really. Industrial chain link, modified to be escape-proof." Her voice was flat, clinical.
There's a medical bay adjacent to the holding area. That's where they do the evaluations and the extractions. Extractions? Organ removal. Mia's jaw tightened. They have a surgical team on site.
Then we go tonight, Derek said.
That's not enough time to plan.
It's all the time we've got. Derek's voice was hard. Every hour we wait is an hour those kids don't have. We go tonight, or we don't go at all. He's right, Marcus said. I've seen operations like this in Eastern Europe. Once they start moving, they don't stop. If they're preparing for extractions, the clock is already running.
Ethan looked at his team, 3 men who had dropped everything to help him save children they'd never met. 3 men who were willing to walk into an armed compound against 30 hostiles with no official support and no guarantee of survival. Okay, he said. We go tonight. But first, we need that evidence drive. Shadow's head came up at the word. She knows where it is, Mia said. She was with me when I dropped it. She remembers. Then she leads. Ethan turned to Derek. Take Marcus and start prepping gear. Jonah, I need detailed infiltration routes and contingency plans for at least 3 scenarios. And I need them before sunset. On it. What about me? Mia asked. You're staying here. Like hell I am. Mia, you've got a bullet wound in your shoulder, and you've been awake for 36 hours. You're in no condition to— Those are my kids in that mine, her voice cracked. Not biologically, but I've been watching them for months. I know their faces. I know their names. I know which ones cry at night, and which ones have stopped crying because they've given up hope. She pushed herself to her feet, swaying but refusing to fall. I'm not staying behind while you risk your lives to save them. Ethan studied her. In her eyes, he saw the same thing he'd seen in the eyes of every soldier who had ever refused to abandon their post. A fire that burned hotter than pain, stronger than fear. Fine, he said. But you follow my orders. Every single one. No arguments, no improvisation. If I tell you to stay down, you stay down. If I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Understood. Then let's go find that drive. The hike took 2 hours. Shadow led them through the frozen wilderness with a certainty that seemed almost supernatural. She moved slowly, favoring her injured leg, but she never hesitated, never second-guessed. She knew exactly where she was going. Ethan walked beside Mia, ready to catch her if she fell. She hadn't fallen yet, but her breathing was getting worse. The cold, the exertion, the blood loss, it was all adding up. You should have stayed at the station, he said. You should stop worrying about me and start worrying about the mission. I can do both. Mia glanced at him. Why do you care? We just met. Because you came here to save children. Because you got shot for it. Because a dog dragged you 3 miles through a blizzard rather than let you die alone. Ethan met her gaze. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. And who am I? Someone worth saving. Mia was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, that's the nicest thing anyone said to me in 8 months. Stick around. I might get even nicer. Despite everything, she laughed. Shadow stopped. The dog stood rigid, nose pointing toward a small depression in the ground about 30 feet ahead. She whined once, then looked back at Mia. This is it, Mia breathed. This is where I fell. They moved forward carefully, Ethan scanning for threats while Mia followed Shadow's lead. The dog pawed at the snow, digging with increasing urgency until her nose struck something solid. A small black case, about the size of a wallet. Mia picked it up with trembling hands. It's here. It's actually here. Open it. She did. Inside, protected by the waterproof casing, was a flash drive. Intact, undamaged. 8 months of my life is on this drive, she said quietly. 8 months of pretending to be a monster so I could bring down real ones. And now it all comes down to whether this data is still readable.
We'll find out when we get back. Ethan took the case and tucked it into his jacket. For now, we need to... Titan's growl cut him off. The dog had been watching their six, and now he was staring into the trees with the focused intensity that meant only one thing. They weren't alone. "Down!" Ethan shouted, tackling Mia into the snow as the first shot cracked through the air. The bullet passed through the space where her head had been a fraction of a second before. More shots followed, a disciplined volley from multiple directions. "Contact left! Contact right!" Ethan returned fire, putting himself between Mia and the incoming rounds. "Fall back to the trees!" They moved. Mia scrambled through the snow, Shadow struggling beside her. Titan had already identified one of the shooters and was charging before Ethan could stop him. "Titan, no!" Too late. The dog vanished into the underbrush. A scream, then silence. Ethan kept moving, kept shooting, kept pushing Mia toward cover. His mind raced through tactical calculations. At least 6 hostiles, maybe more. Coordinated fire patterns suggesting military training. This wasn't Kovac's regular muscle. These were professionals. "How did they find us?" Mia gasped. "Doesn't matter. Move." They reached the tree line and dove behind a fallen log. Ethan reloaded, his hands moving with practiced speed. "Stay here. Stay down." "Ethan, do what I said." He moved before she could argue, flanking left while the enemy fire concentrated on where they'd been. In the chaos, he could see shapes. 4, 5, 6 men moving through the trees with the coordination of a trained squad. Then he saw something else. A familiar figure, standing back from the fighting, watching with the calm detachment of a general observing his troops. Deputy Director William Hayes. Ethan's blood went cold. Hayes was here, personally, which meant this wasn't just a hunting party. This was a cleanup operation. Kill the witnesses, recover the evidence, bury everything. A bullet chewed through the bark inches from Ethan's head. He ducked, rolled, came up firing. One of the attackers went down. Another. But there were too many, even for him. Then Titan emerged from the trees like a demon unleashed. The dog hit the nearest shooter from behind, driving him face first into the snow. Before the man could recover, Titan's jaws closed on his throat. Another attacker tried to intervene. Titan released his first victim and charged, 85 pounds of trained fury slamming into the man's chest. Ethan used the distraction. He moved through the chaos, taking down targets with the cold efficiency of a man who had done this 1,000 times before. 6 attackers, then 5, then 4, then 3. The remaining men started to fall back, their coordination broken, their confidence shattered. They hadn't expected this. They'd expected easy prey. Hayes was already running. "Cover me!" Ethan shouted to no one and sprinted after the deputy director. He caught him 50 feet from a waiting helicopter, a civilian model, unmarked, with rotors already spinning. "Stop!" Hayes turned. In his hand was a pistol, aimed at Ethan's chest. "Commander Cross, you've caused me a great deal of trouble. Not as much as you've caused those children." "Children? Is that what this is about?" Hayes laughed. "You're risking your life for strangers' children, for problems that aren't yours to solve?" "Someone has to." "No, someone doesn't." Hayes's finger tightened on the trigger. "That's the beautiful thing about the world, Commander. No one has to do anything. We choose. And I chose profit over sentiment. You chose to sell children for parts. I chose to see an opportunity and take it. The children were already being trafficked. Whether I was involved or not, they were going to disappear. I simply made sure their disappearance benefited me." "And the agents who died investigating Kovac? The ones who got too close?" "Casualties of commerce," Hayes smiled. "Like you're about to be." He pulled the trigger. The gun clicked empty.
Hayes stared at his weapon in disbelief, then at Ethan, who hadn't moved.
"I took the liberty of emptying your magazine while you were running," Ethan said.
"Pickpocket training. Useful skill." Hayes's face went pale. "You can't kill me. I'm a federal official. There'll be investigations, consequences." "You're right." Ethan lowered his weapon. "I can't kill you. Not without evidence." "Then you've got nothing. My word against yours. A decorated FBI executive against a SEAL with PTSD. Hayes's confidence was returning. "I'll have this buried by morning."
"Maybe." Ethan pulled the evidence drive from his jacket. "But this won't bury so easily." Hayes's eyes locked on the drive. "Where did you—"
Agent Chen kept very detailed records. Names, dates, account numbers. Enough to put you away for 100 lifetimes. Give me that drive and we can negotiate. I have resources. Money. I can make you very wealthy. You already made me something." Ethan stepped closer. "You made me angry."
He hit Hayes once, a controlled strike to the solar plexus that dropped the deputy director to his knees, gasping for air. That was for Agent Reeves. Another strike, to the face this time. Blood sprayed across the snow. That was for every child you helped destroy. Hayes crumpled, moaning. Ethan stood over him, fighting the urge to continue, to finish, to make this man pay with more than just pain. But that wasn't justice. That was vengeance. And there was a difference. "You're going to prison," Ethan said quietly. "You're going to spend the rest of your life in a cell, knowing that everything you built, everything you profited from, was destroyed by a dog who wouldn't give up and a man who couldn't look away." Hayes looked up at him with hate-filled eyes. "You think you've won? Kovac is still out there. The operation is still running. By the time you reach that mine, those children will be gone, disappeared, and you'll have nothing but an empty victory and a lifetime of wondering what happened to them." Ethan's blood went cold. "How much time do we have?" Hayes smiled through bloody teeth. "Less than you think." Ethan hit him again, hard enough to knock him unconscious, then ran. Mia was where he'd left her, shadow pressed against her side. Titan had returned from his rampage, muzzle red, breathing hard, but uninjured. "We have to go," Ethan said. "Now." "What happened? Who was that man?" "Deputy Director Hayes. He's down. But he confirmed what we feared. They're moving the children." The timelines accelerated. "How long?" He didn't say, but it's happening today, maybe right now. Mia's face went white. "We have to warn the others." Ethan was already on his radio. "Ghost, this is Cross. Mission is go. Repeat, mission is go. Immediate departure." Derek's voice crackled back. "Copy. We're ready." "What's the situation?" "Timeline compromised. They're moving the children now. We don't have time for a night approach." "Understood. We'll meet you at the rally point in 40 minutes. Make it 30. Cross out." He turned to Mia. "Can you run?" "I can do whatever I have to do." "Then run." They moved through the forest as fast as Mia's wounded body would allow. Ethan half-carried her when the terrain got rough. Shadow and Titan flanked them, the male dog occasionally circling back to check their rear. 23 children, in cages, waiting to be butchered. "Less than you think." Ethan pushed harder. At the rally point, Derek, Marcus, and Jonah were already loaded for war. Body armor, night vision, enough firepower to hold off a small army. "Transport?" Ethan asked. "I've got a contact with a helicopter service about 10 miles south," Jonah said. "Owes me a favor. He can have us at the mine in 20 minutes. Then call him, now." While Jonah made the call, Ethan turned to Mia. "You've got one more decision to make." "What decision?" "Whether you're coming with us or staying here with the evidence.
Mia's eyes hardened. That's not a decision. That's an insult. It's not. It's a tactical assessment. Ethan's voice was gentle but firm. You're injured. You're exhausted. You're not trained for this kind of assault. If you come, you might be a liability instead of an asset. And if I stay? If you stay, you survive. You get that evidence to people who can use it. You make sure everything we're about to do means something. Mia stared at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Shadow, the dog who had saved her life, who had refused to give up, who had led them to the evidence that could bring down a criminal empire. Shadow can't make it to the mine, she said quietly. Her leg won't hold. No, someone needs to stay with her. Ethan nodded. Mia knelt beside her dog, pressing her forehead against Shadow's muzzle. The canine whined softly, sensing her handler's distress. You saved me, Mia whispered. You saved all of them, even though you don't know it yet. You're the real hero here. Shadow licked her face. Mia stood, tears streaming down her cheeks, and looked at Ethan. Bring them home. I will. Promise me. Ethan took her hands. I promise. The helicopter was a civilian Huey, battered but functional. The pilot was an older man with Vietnam-era tattoos, who asked no questions and accepted payment in the form of a handshake and a promise. As they lifted off, Ethan looked down at Mia, standing in the clearing with Shadow at her side. She raised one hand in farewell. He raised his in return. Then the helicopter banked toward the mountains, and the real mission began. Final check, Derek called out. Weapons? Check, from Marcus. Check, from Jonah. Check, from Ethan. Night vision? Check. Medical? Check. Comms? Check. Derek nodded. Then we're good. 15 minutes to target. Ethan closed his eyes. Behind his lids, he saw faces. 23 children. 23 lives hanging in the balance. Less than you think. He opened his eyes and chambered around. Make it 10. The pilot pushed the throttle forward, and the helicopter screamed toward destiny. The helicopter banked hard over the mountain ridge, and Ethan saw the Black Rock mine for the first time. Even from the air, even in the dying light of late afternoon, he could feel the wrongness of the place. It wasn't just a building. It was a wound in the earth, a place where terrible things happened in the dark. LZ in 2 minutes, the pilot called back. You sure about this? I'm seeing a lot of movement down there. How many? Counting at least 20, maybe more inside. Derek leaned forward. That's twice what we expected. Then we adapt. Ethan checked his weapon one final time. Jonah, the ventilation shaft. Where's the entry point? North face of the mountain, about 300 meters from the main complex. It's hidden behind a rock slide, which is why they haven't sealed it. And it leads directly to the holding area. According to the schematics, it drops into what used to be a storage chamber. From there, it's 50 meters to the main facility. Any cameras? Motion sensors? Nothing on the original blueprints, but that doesn't mean they haven't added security since. Assume they have. Ethan turned to his team. We go in quiet. No contact until we reach the children. Once we engage, we hit fast and we hit hard. Priority 1 is getting those kids out alive. Everything else is secondary. Marcus cracked his knuckles. And Kovac? If he gets in the way, he goes down. But he's not the objective. Understood. Marcus's voice carried the weight of a man who had learned to separate personal feelings from professional duty. Kids first, monsters later. The helicopter touched down behind a ridge, out of sight from the mine complex. Ethan was first out, Titan hitting the ground beside him, already alert, already scanning for threats. "Comm check," Derek said. 1, clear. 2, clear. 3, clear. 4, clear. Good. Stay tight. Stay quiet. Let's move. They covered the 300 meters in under 10 minutes, moving with the practiced efficiency of men who had spent years learning to become invisible. Jonah led, his tablet guiding them to the hidden entrance. Marcus brought up the rear, his massive frame somehow silent despite his size. The rock slide was exactly where the schematics said it would be. A jumble of boulders that looked natural, but concealed a narrow opening just large enough for a man to squeeze through.
"This is it," Jonah whispered. Ethan shined his flashlight into the darkness. The shaft dropped away at a steep angle, disappearing into blackness after about 20 feet. "I'll take point. Titan, with me. Marcus, your rear guard. Anyone comes up behind us, you put them down." "Copy." "Derek, Jonah, you're our eyes and ears. Anything moves that shouldn't, I want to know about it." "Got it." Ethan took a breath, let it out. Then he descended into the dark. The shaft was tight, barely wide enough for his shoulders, with rough walls that scraped against his body armor. Titan scrambled behind him, claws clicking on rock, breathing steady and controlled. 50 feet down. 100. The air grew colder, damper. The smell of earth and old metal gave way to something else, something chemical and wrong. Formaldehyde. And something worse. "You smell that?" Derek's voice was barely audible in his earpiece. "Yeah, keep moving." The shaft leveled out into a horizontal passage. Ethan dropped to his belly and crawled, following the weak light ahead. Behind him, he could hear the others doing the same. Then he reached the end. A metal grate covered the exit, rusted but solid. Through the gaps, Ethan could see a storage chamber, old mining equipment, covered in dust and cobwebs, untouched for decades. "Clear on the other side," he whispered. "Jonah, can you get this grate off?" 30 seconds. Jonah squeezed past him, pulled a small toolkit from his vest, and went to work. The screws came out silently, and the grate lifted away. Ethan dropped into the chamber first, weapon up, scanning. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. "We're in." The team assembled in the darkness, 4 shadows against the deeper black. Ethan pulled up the facility layout on his tablet, a rough map Jonah had compiled from multiple sources. "Holding area is through this passage, down 1 level. Medical bay is adjacent." He pointed at the map. "We split here. Derek and Marcus, you take the medical bay. Neutralize any personnel, secure any evidence. Jonah and I will hit the holding area." "What about guards?" "Kovacs people are concentrated at the main entrance and the primary corridors. If Jonah's intel is right, this section of the mine should be minimally staffed." "And if Jonah's intel is wrong?" "Then we improvise." They moved out. The passage was narrow and low, forcing them to move in a crouch. Ethan could hear sounds now. Distant voices, the hum of generators, the occasional clang of metal on metal. Then he heard something else. Crying. Not loud, not dramatic, just the soft, hopeless weeping of children who had run out of tears. Ethan's jaw tightened. "We're close." "Contact ahead," Derek whispered suddenly. 2 guards, maybe 50 meters. Ethan signaled for the team to hold. He moved forward alone, Titan at his side, until he could see the guards, 2 men in civilian clothes, armed with submachine guns, stationed outside a heavy steel door. The door to the holding area. "I count 2, he murmured into his comm. "Both armed, both alert." "Can you take them quietly?" Ethan studied the angles. The corridor was too narrow for a flanking maneuver, too exposed for a frontal approach. But the guards weren't watching down. They were watching forward, toward the main complex. "Titan," the dog's ears perked. "Distract." Titan understood. He padded forward, staying low, until he was at the edge of the light cast by the guard's lantern.
Then he whined, a single, pitiful sound that echoed through the corridor. Both guards turned. "What the hell? Is that a dog? Where did it come from?" One of them stepped toward Titan, reaching for his radio. "Control, we have a possible breach in sector—" Ethan was on them before the sentence finished. The first guard died silently, Ethan's knife finding the gap between his body armor and his throat. The second managed a half-turn before Marcus, who had moved without a sound, snapped his neck with a single brutal twist. "Sector 7, report." The radio crackled. "What's your status?" Ethan picked it up. "Sector 7 clear. False alarm." A pause. "Copy. Stay alert." "Will do." He dropped the radio and nodded to Marcus. "Medical bay is down that corridor. Go!" Marcus and Derek disappeared into the darkness. Ethan turned to the steel door. It was locked. A heavy deadbolt that required a key he didn't have. "Jonah?" "On it." The technical specialist examined the lock. "Electronic. I can bypass it, but it'll take a minute." "You have 30 seconds. Jonah's hands flew over his equipment. Wires were attached, codes were entered, and 23 seconds later, the lock clicked open. Ethan pushed through. The smell hit him first. A wave of human waste, unwashed bodies and despair so thick it had become physical. He had smelled it before, in the dark places of the world where evil men kept the people they destroyed. But this was worse, because the cages that lined the walls didn't hold adults. They held children. 23 of them, just as Mia had said, ages 6 to 14, huddled in cramped metal enclosures barely large enough for a dog. Some were crying. Some were silent, eyes empty, hope extinguished. Some didn't respond at all, their small bodies still and unmoving, drugged, waiting to be harvested. Ethan stood frozen. In 15 years of combat, he had seen things that would destroy most people. He had killed and watched friends die. He had witnessed atrocities that haunted his sleep. But this was different. "Jesus Christ," Jonah breathed. Titan whined, pressing against Ethan's leg. Even the dog could feel the wrongness of this place. A small voice broke through the silence. "Are you here to hurt us?" Ethan turned. A little girl, 6, maybe 7, was staring at him through the bars of her cage. Her eyes were too big for her face, her skin pale from lack of sunlight, her tiny hands gripping the metal that imprisoned her. Ethan dropped to his knees in front of her cage. "No, sweetheart. I'm here to help you." That's what they said, too. Her voice was flat, dead. They said they were helping, then they put us in cages. Ethan's heart shattered. "I know it's hard to trust anyone right now. I know you've been hurt, but I promise you, I promise, I'm going to get you out of here. All of you." The girl studied his face for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached through the bars and touched his cheek. "Your eyes are sad," she said. "Like mine." Ethan had to fight to keep his voice steady. "What's your name?" "Lily." "That's a beautiful name. Lily, I need you to be brave for a little while longer. Can you do that?" "I've been brave for a long time." "I know you have. Just a little longer." He stood and turned to Jonah. "Get these cages open. Now." "I need keys or cutting tools. These locks are industrial grade." "Then find them." Ethan grabbed his radio. "Derek, Marcus, status." Static. Then Derek's voice, strained. "We've got a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The medical bay isn't just for evaluations. There's a surgery in progress. Right now. They're taking a kid apart on the table." Ethan's blood went ice cold. "Can you stop them?" "We're pinned down. At least 4 hostiles, maybe more. And the doctors, they're still working. They won't stop." "Hold your position. I'm coming." "Ethan, wait!" but he was already moving.
The corridor between the holding area and the medical bay was only 50 meters, but it felt like miles. Ethan could hear gunfire now. The sharp crack of Derek's rifle, the answering chatter of submachine guns. He rounded the corner and ran straight into a guard. The man barely had time to raise his weapon before Ethan hit him. A shoulder strike that drove him into the wall, followed by an elbow to the face that dropped him unconscious. More gunfire ahead. Closer now. Ethan burst through a doorway and found himself in hell. The medical bay was a nightmare made real. Surgical tables, industrial lighting, medical equipment that belonged in a hospital, not an abandoned mine. And on the center table, strapped down and sedated, was a boy no older than 10, his abdomen already cut open, his organs exposed. 3 doctors, if they could be called that, were still working, still cutting, still harvesting. Even with bullets flying around them. Derek and Marcus were pinned behind a row of cabinets, trading fire with guards who had taken cover near the entrance. The doctors ignored them all, focused entirely on their butchery. Ethan saw red. He didn't think, didn't calculate, didn't follow any tactical protocol he'd ever learned. He simply moved. The first doctor fell with a bullet between his eyes before he could look up from his work. The second managed to scream before Ethan's knife opened his throat. The third tried to run. Actually tried to run. Like there was anywhere on earth he could hide from what was coming. Ethan caught him by the collar and threw him against the wall. "Please," the doctor gasped. "I was just following orders. They made me." "You were harvesting a child's organs." "I had no choice." Ethan's fist connected with the man's face. Once, twice, 3 times. Each blow carrying the weight of 23 children in cages. Of parents who would never see their kids again. Of a world that had failed the most innocent and expected monsters like this to face no consequences. "Ethan," Derek's hand caught his arm. "He's down. He's down. We need him alive for testimony." Ethan stopped. His knuckles were bloody. The doctor was unconscious, his face a ruin. "The boy," Ethan gasped. "The boy on the table." Marcus was already there, hands working with surprising gentleness to assess the damage. "He's alive. Barely." They hadn't finished. "If we can get him to a hospital in the next hour, he might make it. Then we get him out. Now." "What about the others? The children in the cages?" "Jonah's working on it, but we need extraction." Ethan grabbed his radio. "Pilot, this is Cross. We need immediate evac. Landing zone is compromised. Find another option." The pilot's voice crackled back. "There's a clearing about 200 meters east of the main complex. I can touch down there, but you'll have to fight your way through." "Understood. Be ready in 10 minutes." "Copy." Derek reloaded his weapon. 10 minutes? Against how many hostiles? "However many it takes." Ethan looked at his team. 2 men he trusted with his life, now facing impossible odds to save children they'd never met. "You ready?" Marcus chambered around. "I was born ready." Derek checked his sights. "Let's go get those kids." They moved back to the holding area at a run. Jonah had found a key, taken from one of the dead guards, and was working through the cages as fast as he could. "How many free?" Ethan asked. 12. Another 11 to go." "You have 5 minutes." "That's not enough time." "Make it enough." The first children to be released stood in terrified clusters, not understanding what was happening, not trusting the men who had opened their cages. A few of the older ones were trying to help the younger ones, but most were too traumatized to do anything but cower. "Listen to me." Ethan knelt so he was at their level. "I know you're scared. I know you've been through something terrible, but I need you to trust me right now. We're going to get you out of here, but you have to follow us. You have to stay close. Can you do that?" Lily, the little girl who had touched his cheek, stepped forward. "I'll help," she said. "I'll make them follow." "That's very brave of you." I'm not brave. I'm just tired of being scared. Ethan wanted to weep. Instead, he nodded. Then let's go. Stay behind me. Stay quiet. And no matter what happens, don't stop moving. Jonah freed the last child just as alarms began to wail. They know we're here, Derek said. Then we make them regret it. They moved in formation, Ethan at point, Derek and Marcus on the flanks, Jonah in the middle with the children clustered around him. Titan ranged ahead, scouting, warning of threats before they materialized. The first contact came at the junction between the holding area and the main corridor. 3 guards, caught off guard by the alarms, went down in seconds. The second contact was harder. 5 men with better positions, better cover, better training. Derek took a round to his body armor that knocked him down. Marcus had to physically shield 2 children from the crossfire, while Ethan eliminated the shooters. You okay? Ethan helped Derek to his feet. Ribs might be cracked. I'll live. Derek grinned through the pain. Keep moving. They pushed forward. More guards, more gunfire, more obstacles that melted away before 4 men who refused to be stopped. Then they reached the main corridor, and Viktor Kovac was waiting for them. He stood at the center of the passage, flanked by a dozen armed men, the last of his security force, gathered for a final stand. In his hand was a remote detonator. Commander Cross, Kovac's smile was almost pleasant. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Step aside. Let us pass. I'm afraid I can't do that. You see, those children represent a significant investment. An investment I'm not prepared to lose. Your operation is finished. Your partner Hayes is in custody. Your doctors are dead or captured. It's over. Is it? Kovac raised the detonator. This facility is wired with enough explosives to bring down the entire mountain. If I press this button, everyone dies. You, me, the children, everyone. You'd kill yourself to stop us? I'd kill everyone to protect what I built. Kovac's smile widened. But I'd prefer not to. So let's negotiate. There's nothing to negotiate. There's always something to negotiate, Commander. You're a practical man, a survivor. So here's my offer. Walk away. Take your team and leave. I'll relocate the operation somewhere else, somewhere you'll never find. And everyone in this corridor gets to live. And the children? The children are my property. They stay with me. Ethan's finger tightened on his trigger. They're not property. They're human beings. They're inventory, assets, products to be processed and sold. Kovac shrugged. You can judge me all you want, Commander, but the world I operate in doesn't care about morality. It cares about supply and demand. And the demand for healthy organs from children? It's never been higher. Behind Ethan, Lily's small hand found his and squeezed. He's lying, she whispered. He always lies. Ethan looked down at her. What do you mean? The bombs. He told us about the bombs all the time. Said he'd kill us all if anyone tried to escape. Her voice was steady, far too steady for a child her age. But one of the guards said it was just to scare us. Said there weren't any real bombs. Kovac's smile flickered, just for a moment, just enough. The child is confused, he said. Traumatized. She doesn't know what she's saying. I think she knows exactly what she's saying. Ethan raised his weapon. I think your bombs are a bluff. And I think you're out of options. You're willing to bet 23 lives on a child's word? I'm willing to bet 23 lives on the fact that you're a businessman, not a martyr. You don't want to die. You want to escape, regroup, rebuild. And you can't do any of that if you're buried under a mountain. Kovac's jaw tightened. Last chance, Commander. Walk away, or... Titan launched himself at Kovac before the sentence finished. The dog hit him center mass, driving him backward, jaws closing on the arm that held the detonator. Kovac screamed.
The detonator flew from his grasp and clattered across the floor. Everything exploded into chaos. Kovac's guards opened fire, but Ethan and his team were already moving. Derek and Marcus created a wall of suppressive fire, while Jonah shepherded the children behind cover. Ethan went for Kovac. The trafficker had pulled free from Titan and was scrambling for the detonator. Ethan tackled him 2 feet short, driving him into the ground. They fought. Kovac was stronger than he looked, driven by desperation and the knowledge that capture meant a lifetime in the darkest hole the justice system could find. He got a hand around Ethan's throat, squeezed. Ethan's vision started to tunnel. Then Titan was there, jaws closing on Kovac's wrist, pulling, tearing. The hand released. Air rushed back into Ethan's lungs. He didn't hesitate. One punch to stun, another to disorient. Then his hands found Kovac's head and twisted. The crack of a breaking neck echoed through the corridor. Silence fell. "Targets down," Derek called. "All hostiles neutralized." Ethan stood over Kovac's body, breathing hard. The man who had trafficked hundreds of children, who had butchered them for profit, who had built an empire on their suffering, stared at the ceiling with dead eyes. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. "Commander," Marcus's voice was urgent. "We need to move. More hostiles could be on the way." Ethan nodded. "Get the children to the extraction point. I'll bring up the rear." They moved. The 200 meters to the clearing felt like the longest journey of Ethan's life. Children stumbled and cried. The wounded boy from the surgical table had to be carried on Marcus's back. Twice they encountered pockets of resistance, guards who hadn't gotten the message that their leader was dead. And twice they eliminated them without breaking stride. Then they burst into the open air. The helicopter was waiting, rotor spinning, pilot waving them forward. "Load 'em up," Ethan shouted. "Everyone on board." The children were lifted into the helicopter one by one. The wounded boy was laid carefully on the floor, where Jonah immediately began emergency medical treatment. Derek and Marcus took positions at the door, weapons trained on the tree line in case of pursuit. Ethan was the last one on. As the helicopter lifted off, he looked down at the Black Rock mine, the place where monsters had built their empire, where children had been treated as livestock, where evil had flourished in the darkness. It was over now, but the cost, the trauma those children would carry for the rest of their lives, that would never fully heal. Lily appeared at his side. Her small hand found his again. "You kept your promise," she said. Ethan looked down at her. At this brave, broken little girl who had survived things no child should ever have to endure. "Yeah," he said softly. "I did." "Does that mean we're safe now?" Ethan thought about Hayes in custody, about Kovac dead on the floor of his own mine, about the evidence that would put everyone involved in prison for the rest of their lives. "Yeah, Lily, you're safe now." She leaned against him, exhaustion finally overwhelming her. "Good," she whispered. "I'm tired of being scared." Ethan put his arm around her and held her close as the helicopter carried them away from the darkness and toward the dawn. 23 children. 23 souls reclaimed from the abyss. It wasn't enough to undo the horror. It wasn't enough to heal the wounds. But it was a start. And sometimes, a start was all you could ask for. The helicopter touched down at St. Mary's Medical Center in Helena, just as the sun crested the eastern mountains. Medical teams were waiting, alerted by Jonah's radio calls during the flight. 23 children were carried, walked, or wheeled into the emergency department, while federal agents established a perimeter around the building. Ethan stayed with Lily until a nurse gently pried her hand from his. "I'll come back," he told her. "I promise." "You keep making promises." And I keep keeping them." The ghost of a smile crossed her face, the first he'd seen. Then she was gone, disappearing through the double doors into a world of doctors and tests and the long, painful process of healing. Derek found him standing in the hallway, staring at nothing. "You okay?" "No." Ethan's voice was hollow. "I don't think I'll ever be okay again." "That's normal. That's how you know you're still human." "Those kids, Derek. What they went through. What they saw." He shook his head. "Some of them are never going to recover. Some of them are going to carry this for the rest of their lives. And some of them are going to survive, going to thrive, because people like you gave them a chance." Derek put a hand on his shoulder. "You can't save everyone from every scar, but you can give them the opportunity to heal. That's all any of us can do." Ethan nodded slowly. He knew Derek was right, but knowing and feeling were different things. "Where's Mia?" "On her way. Local FBI is escorting her in. Should be here in about 20 minutes. And Hayes? Federal custody. His lawyers are already screaming about illegal detention. But with the evidence we recovered, plus Mia's documentation, plus the testimony of everyone we captured," Derek's smile was grim. "He's never seen daylight again." "What about the doctors, the ones who survived?" "Singing like canaries. Turns out they weren't true believers, just mercenaries following the money. They're giving up everyone they've ever worked with in exchange for reduced sentences. Reduced sentences for harvesting children's organs? For testifying against the rest of the network. There are other operations, Ethan. Other mines, other facilities, other children. The information these people have could help us shut down the entire organization." Ethan's hands clenched into fists. "And in exchange, they get to live? They get to live in prison for the rest of their natural lives." Derek's voice hardened. "It's not justice, not the kind any of us would choose, but it's the best the system can offer." "The system failed those children." "Yes, it did. And now it's our job to make sure it doesn't fail them again." Mia arrived 19 minutes later. She came through the hospital doors in a wheelchair. A nurse had refused to let her walk, with Shadow limping beside her. The FBI K-9 was wearing a compression bandage on her leg, but her tail was wagging, her eyes bright. The moment she saw Ethan, Mia tried to stand. "Don't." He crossed to her in 3 strides. "Don't you dare tear those stitches after everything we went through." "I had to come. I had to see them. They're safe, all of them. Even the boy from the surgical table. Marcus got him here in time. He's in surgery now, but the doctors think he's going to make it." Mia's eyes filled with tears. "All of them? You got all of them out?" "Every single one." She reached for him, and he let her pull him down into an embrace that lasted longer than either of them had expected. Her body shook with sobs she'd been holding back for 8 months. The accumulated grief of watching horrors she couldn't stop. Of pretending to be a monster to catch monsters. Of almost dying in the snow while her dog dragged her toward a man she didn't know. "Thank you," she whispered against his neck. "Thank you." "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do." "You could have walked away. You could have called the authorities and let them handle it. Instead, you came into that mine and you fought for children you'd never met. You spent 8 months in hell for those same children. You got shot trying to save them." Ethan pulled back enough to look at her face. "We're both idiots, apparently." She laughed, a wet, broken sound that was somehow beautiful. "Apparently." Shadow nudged her way between them, pressing her nose against Ethan's hand. He scratched her ears with the automatic gentleness of someone who understood that dogs were more than pets. "She saved your life," he said. "Dragged you 3 miles through a blizzard with a bullet wound of her own. She's the best partner I've ever had." Mia's hand found Shadow's head. "Better than most humans I know." "I can relate."
Ethan looked across the waiting room to where Titan lay with his head on his paws, watching everything with tired but vigilant eyes. They're the reason any of us are alive right now. The next 72 hours were a blur of interviews, debriefings, and paperwork. Federal prosecutors descended on Helena like locusts, desperate to assemble cases against everyone involved in the Kovacs syndicate. Ethan and his team gave statements that ran to hundreds of pages. Mia's evidence drive was cataloged, analyzed, and deemed the most comprehensive documentation of a trafficking network in FBI history. Deputy Director Hayes was charged with 17 counts of conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and accessory to murder. His lawyers negotiated, threatened, and ultimately capitulated when confronted with the overwhelming evidence of his crimes. The other members of the network fell like dominoes. Shipping companies, financial institutions, overseas buyers. Every thread that Kovac had woven into his empire was systematically unraveled. And the children, those 23 souls who had been caged like animals and prepared for slaughter, began the long process of recovery. Social workers arrived from across the country, specialists in childhood trauma who had dedicated their lives to healing the unhealable. Families were contacted. Tearful reunions played out in hospital corridors. For the children without families, the runaways, the foster kids, the ones the system had already failed, new placements were arranged with desperate urgency and careful vetting. Lily was one of these. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was 4. The aunt who had taken her in had surrendered her to foster care 6 months later. Too much trouble, she'd said. Too much responsibility. Lily had bounced between 3 homes before running away, before being snatched off the street by Kovac's people, before ending up in a cage in a mine in Montana. She had no one. Until Ethan walked into her hospital room 3 days after the rescue. "Hi," she said. Her voice was still too small, too careful, but there was something different in her eyes. Something that hadn't been there in the mine. Hope. "Hi yourself." Ethan pulled up a chair and sat down beside her bed. "How are you feeling?" "Better. The doctors say I'm healthy, that they didn't hurt me that way." She swallowed. "Not like some of the others." Ethan nodded. He knew what she meant. Some of the children had already been prepared for harvesting. Blood tests, tissue typing, the preliminary steps before surgery. Lily had been spared that, but only because she'd been marked as a long-term investment. A child young enough and healthy enough to be worth keeping alive for future use. The cruelty of it made him sick. "I talked to the social workers," Ethan said. "They're trying to find you a good home." "I know. They told me." Lily picked at her blanket. "They said there are families who want to adopt kids like me. Kids who've been through bad things." "That's right. But what if they're lying?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "What if they're like him? What if they just want to hurt me too?" Ethan's heart broke. "Lily, look at me." She raised her eyes to his. "There are bad people in the world. You know that better than most. But there are good people too. People who will love you and protect you and never, ever hurt you." He leaned forward. "And I'm going to make sure you end up with good people. I promise." "You keep making promises." "And I keep keeping them, remember?" That ghost of a smile again, a little stronger this time. "I remember." The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of Ethan's life. He stayed in Helena longer than he'd planned, working with prosecutors, testifying at preliminary hearings, helping coordinate the placement of rescued children. Derek, Marcus, and Jonah had returned to their own lives. Derek to his security consultancy in Nevada, Marcus to his physical therapy in San Diego, Jonah to whatever shadowy corners of the intelligence community still claimed his talents. But Ethan couldn't leave. Not yet. Not while there was still work to do. And not while Mia was still there. They had fallen into an easy rhythm. Coffee in the hospital cafeteria,
walks through Helena's quiet streets when her strength allowed, long conversations that stretched into the night. She told him about her 8 months undercover, about the nightmares that still woke her screaming, about the guilt of surviving when so many others hadn't. He told her about his years as a SEAL, about the missions that had cost him pieces of his soul, about the retirement that had felt less like rest and more like exile. They were both broken, both scarred, both carrying wounds that would never fully heal. But somehow, together, they found moments of peace. One night, sitting on the roof of her hotel, Mia asked him the question he'd been dreading. "What happens now?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He watched the stars wheel overhead, felt the cold mountain air against his face, listened to the distant sounds of a city settling into sleep. "I don't know," he admitted. "That's not very reassuring." "I know." He turned to look at her. 3 weeks ago, I was alone in a cabin splitting firewood and trying to convince myself I was happy. Now I've killed more men than I can count, helped rescue 23 children from a trafficking ring, and I can't imagine going back to that cabin without you. Mia was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. "I've spent 8 months pretending to be someone else, lying every day, hiding every feeling, wearing a mask so tight I forgot what my own face looked like." Her voice was soft. "When Shadow dragged me to your cabin, I thought I was dying. And part of me was relieved, because at least if I died, I wouldn't have to keep pretending anymore." "Mia, but you didn't let me die. You saved my life, and you saved those children. And now I'm sitting here looking at the stars with a man I barely know. And for the first time in 8 months, I feel like myself again." She squeezed his hand. "I don't want to lose that feeling. I don't want to go back to being alone." "Then don't." "It's not that simple." "It can be." Ethan turned to face her fully. "Stay with me. Come back to the cabin. Bring Shadow. Bring your nightmares. Bring everything you're carrying. We'll figure it out together. You're asking me to give up my career, my life, everything I've worked for. I'm asking you to build something new, with me." His eyes held hers. "I've spent 15 years fighting other people's wars. I'm tired, Mia. Tired of being alone. Tired of pretending the wounds don't matter. I want something different. Something that matters for its own sake, not because someone ordered me to care." "And you want that with me? A woman you've known for 3 weeks?" "I want that with a woman who crawled 3 miles through a blizzard to save children she'd never met. With the woman who went undercover in hell because she believed she could make a difference. With the woman who's sitting next to me right now, looking at stars, wondering if it's too crazy to hope for something good." He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "Yeah, I want that with you." Mia's eyes glistened. "You're insane." "Probably. This will never work." "Maybe. I have PTSD and trust issues and a tendency to push people away when they get too close. I have PTSD and survivor's guilt and a habit of solving every problem with violence." Ethan smiled. "We're perfect for each other." She laughed, a real laugh, warm and full. "Okay." "Okay?" "Okay. I'll come to your cabin. I'll bring my dog and my nightmares, and we'll figure it out together." She leaned forward and kissed him softly. "But if it doesn't work out, I'm blaming you." "Fair enough." 6 months later, the cabin in Montana had been transformed. Not physically, it was still the same small structure on 40 acres of wilderness, still remote, still quiet. But it was no longer a refuge for one broken man. It was a home for 2. Mia had taken leave from the FBI, indefinite, possibly permanent. She spent her days working with survivors' advocacy groups, using her experience to help other trafficking victims navigate the long road to recovery. Shadow, fully healed now, had been officially retired from canine service and spent her days lounging on the porch or playing with Titan in the meadow. Ethan had returned to the land, but differently than before. The wood splitting and isolation were gone, replaced by something new, a foundation, established with donations from grateful families and the seized assets of Kovic's empire. The foundation provided therapy, education, and support for children who had survived trafficking. 23 families received monthly checks. 23 futures were being rebuilt, including Lily's. The adoption had been complicated. A single combat veteran with PTSD wasn't exactly the ideal candidate, according to social services. But Ethan had something most candidates didn't have: a recommendation from every federal prosecutor involved in the Kovac case, a background check that could withstand any scrutiny, and a 7-year-old girl who had refused to consider any other option. "I want to live with him," Lily had told the social worker, her small voice steady and certain. "He's the only one who kept his promises." The paperwork had taken 3 months. The adjustment period was still ongoing. But every morning, when Ethan woke to find Lily curled up between Shadow and Titan, her small body nestled against the 2 dogs who had somehow become her guardians, he knew they had made the right choice. On the anniversary of the rescue, Ethan and Mia stood on the ridge overlooking the cabin, watching the sun set behind the mountains. "Hard to believe it's been a year," Mia said. "Hard to believe any of it happened." Ethan's arm tightened around her shoulders. "Sometimes I wake up thinking I dreamed the whole thing." "The nightmares?" "Those too, but they're getting better." He paused. "Are yours?" "Slowly. Dr. Patterson says I'm making progress." Mia leaned into him. "She also says having a support system makes a difference. Having people who understand what you've been through." "She sounds smart." "She is." "She's also been hinting that I should consider a more permanent commitment to said support system." Ethan's heart skipped. "Is that so?" "Mm-hmm." Mia turned to face him, her eyes bright with something he hadn't seen before. Not hope, not peace, but joy, pure and unfiltered. "What do you think about that?" "I think—" Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I think I was planning to ask you the same thing." He opened the box. Inside, a simple gold band caught the fading light. "I know it's not much, and I know we're both still figuring things out. But I've spent a year watching you heal, watching you fight, watching you become the person you were always meant to be." His voice roughened. "And I don't want to watch anymore. I want to be beside you, for the rest of whatever time we have." Mia stared at the ring, at him, at the life they had built from the wreckage of their pasts. "Yes." "Yes? Yes, you impossible, wonderful, stubborn man." She threw her arms around him. "Yes." They married in the meadow behind the cabin on a crisp October morning. Derek stood as best man, his ribs finally healed, his cynicism temporarily suspended for the occasion. Marcus and Jonas served as groomsmen, their presence a reminder that brotherhood forged in combat lasted long after the fighting stopped. Lily walked down the aisle carrying a basket of wildflowers, Shadow and Titan flanking her like honor guards. She had grown in the past year, taller, stronger, more confident. The hollowness in her eyes had been replaced by something brighter. Not innocence, that was gone forever, but resilience, the kind that came from surviving the worst and choosing to live anyway. When Ethan said his vows, he spoke directly to Mia, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'll always be the man you need me to be. But I know this. Every day, for the rest of my life, I will choose you.
I will fight for you. I will protect you, heal with you, grow with you." His voice cracked. "And I will never, ever stop being grateful that a dog dragged you to my door." Mia laughed through her tears. "I vow to love you on good days and bad days. To remind you that you're more than your scars. To make you breakfast when you forget to eat, and drag you outside when you forget to live." She took his hands. "And I vow to never let either of us face the darkness alone again." The pastor pronounced them married. The kiss that followed was worth waiting for. That evening, after the guests had gone and Lily had fallen asleep between her two canine guardians, Ethan and Mia sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. "You know what I've been thinking about?" Mia asked. "Tell me." "Shadow. The day she found me." Mia's hand found his in the darkness. "I was dying. I knew I was dying, and I'd made peace with it because at least the suffering would stop. But Shadow had other plans. She wouldn't let me go, wouldn't let me give up, even when I wanted to, even when I begged her to leave me. She kept pulling." Mia's voice softened. "I used to think it was training, instinct, programming. But now I wonder..." "Wonder what?" "If maybe she knew something I didn't. If maybe she could see a future I couldn't see yet." Mia turned to look at him. "A future that included you, and Lily, and this life we're building together." Ethan considered this. "You think dogs can see the future?" "I think dogs can see the truth. They know who we are underneath all the masks and walls and pretending. And Shadow saw something in me worth saving." Mia smiled. "Maybe that's not seeing the future. Maybe that's just seeing clearly." "Either way, I'm glad she found me." "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the wind in the pines, the distant howl of coyotes, the peaceful breathing of dogs and child inside. "Ethan?" "Yeah?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For keeping your promises, for coming into that mine, for giving me a chance to live when I was ready to die." She squeezed his hand. "For all of it." Ethan lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it. "Thanks, Shadow. She's the one who did the hard work." As if hearing her name, Shadow appeared at the door, Titan beside her. Both dogs padded over and settled at their feet, forming a furry barrier between their humans and the night. Guardians still. Protectors always. "You know what the lesson is?" Mia asked softly. "The one I keep coming back to?" "Tell me." "That help comes in forms we don't expect. That sometimes destiny has 4 legs and a wet nose. That the worst moments of our lives can lead us to the best ones, if we're brave enough to keep moving forward." Ethan nodded slowly. He thought of everything they had been through, the blood and the horror and the children in cages, the sacrifices and the losses and the scars that would never fully fade. But he also thought of Lily, sleeping safely in a warm bed, of 23 families reunited with their children, of a network of evil dismantled and destroyed, of Mia beside him, alive and healing, when she could so easily have died in the snow. "Keep moving forward," he repeated. "That's the secret." "That's the secret." Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient courses, indifferent to human suffering, human triumph, human love. But down on earth, in a small cabin surrounded by wilderness and peace, 4 broken souls had found their way back to light. 2 humans, 2 dogs, 1 family. And the knowledge that no matter how dark the night, dawn was always coming. All you had to do was keep moving forward until you found it. If this story touched your heart, comment your city below. Share it with someone who needs to know that hope is real, that even in the darkest places, light can find a way in. Like, subscribe, and remember,
Sometimes destiny arrives on 4 paws. Sometimes the help we need comes from places we never expected. And sometimes the broken pieces of our lives can be rebuilt into something more beautiful than we ever imagined. Be kind to animals. They carry hearts bigger than their bodies. Be kind to children. They are the future we're fighting for. And be kind to yourself. Healing takes time, but it does come. God bless you. God bless our veterans. God bless the rescuers and the survivors and the faithful hearts who refuse to give up. And may you always find your way home, no matter how far you've wandered, no matter how dark the road. Because home isn't just a place. Home is wherever love refuses to let you go.